Very nice to have you all. Thank you for coming this evening. So I'm here with Rob Schwartz, Assistant Dean of Admissions at UCLA Law. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Steve Schwartz. I run the LSAT blog. I also host the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast. I've been teaching the LSAT for just about 15 years now, believe it or not. Started with my own LSAT journey, going from a 152 all the way up to a 175. It took me an entire year, and my hope is that it won't take you nearly that long. And that's part of what I'm doing with all my resources on the blog and the YouTube channel and the podcast and whatnot. And I'm very excited to be joined tonight by Rob Schwartz. Rob, you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yes. Hi, Steve. I should probably say at the outset, we're not related, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Always the caveat. Yeah.
Nice. Thanks for having me on, and looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, fantastic, Rob. You want to share a little bit about your role at UCLA and what you've done previously? I know you've been in the industry a long time.
Yeah, so I actually have been here as the Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid at UCLA since 2006. So I had more hair, a little less gray. So I guess that's 13 years now. And before that, I actually worked in New York City for 11 years as the Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid at Cardozo Law School, Benjamin Cardozo School of Law, which is my alma mater. And before that, I actually went to law school, practiced law, clerked for a year, and then practiced mostly bankruptcy and matrimonial law. So I was divorcing people for a living. And that's the brief bio.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks for sharing, Rob. I'm excited to get some of your insights on admissions tonight. So I was thinking that for tonight, the framework will be, I'll present briefly on the digital LSAT and give some self-study advice. Then you could present on admissions and what UCLA Law has to offer. And we'll open it up to Q&A.
Sounds great.
Fantastic. All right. So folks, thanks again for joining tonight. I thought I would share a little bit about the digital LSAT, given that is the big topic of discussion this year, really, since the LSAT is going digital fully in just a few weeks with the September LSAT. It'll be fully digital in North America. Everyone's going to be getting the LSAT on a tablet, specifically a Microsoft Surface Go 10-inch tablet. It's no longer a paper and pencil exam. And so, of course, you want to adjust your prep accordingly. Specifically, no longer writing in your prep books with pencils or pens, no drawing diagrams freehand on the page, since you can't do that on the tablet. Instead, on the digital LSAT, you will get a booklet of scratch paper, about 12 to 14 pages, unlined, 8.5 by 11. That's where you're going to do all your writing. And so LSAC has made available on their website a couple of exams in the digital format. Go on familiar.lsac.org, and you can play around with the features, see what that looks like. I'm not going to do a full walkthrough here, of course, because I've done that elsewhere plenty of times on the YouTube channel. You can watch exactly what my walkthrough looks like. You can highlight, you can underline, but you cannot draw freehand. That's the biggest adjustment you have to make. So aside from using LSAC's site, you could, in addition or separately, use PDFs on your computer screen if you have access to them. Otherwise, treat your books like screens, meaning you don't write on them. You just do your work on the side. Now, there's been a lot of confusion about score release and cancellations with the digital LSAT, because in the July LSAT, you were able to see your score before deciding whether to cancel. That was a one-time thing just for July, because that was the transitional exam. September and beyond, you do not get to see your score before deciding whether to cancel. And so lots of folks have questions around whether to cancel, whether not to. And Dean Schwartz, I'd love to get your thoughts on this a little bit later, but I'm thinking that my general recommendation when I tell folks is it's typically not necessary to cancel, since schools don't average multiple scores. They only take the highest. Unless you know that something went horribly wrong, you might want to cancel. But otherwise, it might be best to keep the score, because you never know. Maybe you did better than you expected, and if not, you can always retake. Now, with score release, people often have the expectation, reasonably so, that you will get your score back sooner or even immediately on the digital LSAT. That's not the case. You still have your typical approximately 3 weeks wait time until scores come back. In the meantime, you can work on applications. You can try to relax and not stress too much, put it out of your mind, but you will still have to wait a couple of weeks to get your scores. Hopefully they will come back faster in the future. But for now, we still do have that short wait. Now, folks ask for digital LSAT prep, do I need a tablet? Do I need special software? What should I do? You don't need to buy a tablet. but I would recommend at least practicing on one to some extent. Doesn't have to be the Microsoft Surface Go specifically. Any old tablet would be fine. A Samsung, an iPad, an Amazon Fire. You could use those just to simulate it a little bit because the smartphone doesn't do it justice, and computers obviously don't have that touch screen interactivity. So that kind of wouldn't really fully mimic the digital LSAT. There have been some tech issues with the digital LSAT in July. I'm hoping they'll fix those by September and other LSATs this fall, but it's too early to say. And I think LSAC still needs a little bit more time to work out all the kinks. So while we don't expect problems will happen, you do want to be ready for them. One big thing in particular is the stylus not working fantastically. So if you find your stylus is not super responsive in terms of highlighting or underlining, maybe you just want to use your finger instead and be ready for that. Additionally, there have been some reported issues with the screen glare, halogen lights or fluorescent lights on the ceiling reflecting off of the tablet. So you might want to test that out when you walk into the test center. How does your tablet look? Can you see the screen well? Do you need to adjust it slightly? If you can't figure out the angle, then of course, talk to the proctors before the test starts so you can avoid any issues and avoid having that impact your score too heavily. Now, I have a lot more I could say on digital LSAT. I could talk forever about it, but I don't want to ramble too much. I do just want to say briefly that with the 3 LSATs coming up this fall, again, an admissions-related thing, you might want to think about whether, if you're not ready for September, maybe you want to do October or November instead or in addition. I'm curious to get the admission side of this, but my thought is that November still is not too late to take the LSAT and apply reasonably early this cycle. That's always the question I get. Is November too late? My intuition is that it's not. I think it's still plenty early enough. Obviously, the spring LSATs start to get late into the cycle, but anything September, October, November could be good. And my thought, honestly, is that if you're taking one of them and you're not feeling totally ready, you might want to take another one as well, because through luck alone, you could do a couple points better. There is a score band or margin of error of 3.5 points on each end, meaning that, let's say if your true aptitude was a 160, maybe you retake it, and through nothing more than luck alone, you get a 163 or 164. That obviously opens far more doors than a 160 would. And if you do worse, no big deal, since schools are not averaging multiple scores. We'll get into lots of details later, but Rob, I want to turn it over to you and get your thoughts on this and more.
Yeah, well, I do agree with everything you just said there. I guess starting with the most recent, the November LSAT is certainly fine to take. We here, every law school is going to have their own specific deadlines and instructions. We even take the January LSAT. So I do agree taking it earlier is better, but applying with the best score you can have is better even if that's later. So if you take the test in November and you don't do as well as you anticipated, and you were to take it in January and have a 10-point increase, obviously that would be better. And I also agreed with what you said about canceling. I mean, generally schools, because we report the highest score, right, to the ABA, and that's what we're ranked based on, schools are going to put a lot of weight on the highest score. I do think, though, if you really, and I think you said this, if you really felt like you may have bombed the test, it may make sense to cancel it, although you never really know. And if you weren't feeling well or something, you can always write an addendum and explain that in the application.
Well, thanks for sharing your thoughts on that, Rob. I appreciate the feedback. It's good to get the confirmation as always. Do you want to share a little bit about what you're seeing or what you're anticipating for this particular application cycle?
Sure. Well, I've been doing this long enough to know that, it's hard to anticipate what's going to happen. And the cycle is really just starting. I won't put much weight on this, but we got more applications on day one than we've ever gotten. But I don't know if that really means anything. This is still very, very early. Our application just opened on the 1st of September. So it's very hard now to have a sense of what the cycle is going to be. This past year there was a slight decrease overall national in the numbers, but here at UCLA, our numbers stayed pretty much the same. We had just a little over 6,000 applications to the law school. So I'm anticipating, you can see if I'll be wrong about this, I'm anticipating not a big increase or a big decrease, pretty steady year, but we'll see what happens.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. So Given your experience working in admissions itself, can you share a little bit just about what the process looks like? Day one, applications opened. You got a lot of applications. For those folks who submitted on day one, what happens next in terms of reviewing the files?
Well, they need to relax for a little bit because at this stage of the game, we actually are beginning to read and review the files. We do that on a rolling basis, but we generally don't release our admissions decisions till a little bit later in the fall. And anybody who's tuning in thinking, oh my goodness, I didn't apply, it's already September 16th. This is incredibly, incredibly early in the process. And we're going to get applications all the way until our deadline, which is the 1st of February. We're going to offer admission to people who apply later in the process. We know we're going to want to do that. And that's why we review the files on a rolling basis, but we admit conservatively as we go through to leave spots open throughout the process.
So you said the deadline was February 1st.
Yeah.
Now, I know that there are LSATs in the spring. Are there ever cases where you accept folks with scores in the spring? Where you make exceptions to the deadline?
Yeah, it's rare. I would say for us, the last LSAT exam that we're going to take will be in January. After that, I would say it would be pretty difficult for somebody to take the LSAT after that and then get admission for that following fall. But if somebody does take it, they're always welcome to still apply and to get in touch. If they've already applied, to get in touch with me to let me know about their score. And we're happy to see whether or not it could be an option that we could take them at that point.
Right. Okay, so you said that you leave room for those later in the cycle, but would you say typically that folks have a better chance applying, let's say, this calendar year with the November LSAT being the latest one rather than the January?
Yes, I would. My advice to applicants is simply this: apply as early as possible, but with your strongest credentials. So ideally, you've been thinking about this, you've been preparing, you're going to take the LSAT either next month in October or in November, but know that hopefully try to be a little more relaxed as you take it, knowing that if it doesn't go well, if you don't have your ideal day, you will be able to sit for it again, and that we will put a lot of weight on the higher score.
Right. We got a question here just asking us to confirm September, November LSATs, anywhere within that range is okay for the fall cycle. Yeah.
I really view that all as one and the same, whether you're taking, now in October or November, makes no difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how do you look at retakes? If someone has 2 or 3 takes on their record, whether they're spaced close together, whether they're close together, like clustered this fall or spread out, does it really matter?
I don't really think it matters. I think where taking the LSAT numerous times can make a difference is more when, there's no magic number, but when we see a lot of scores, and we sometimes see that. It's rare, but we'll see applicants who've taken the LSAT, 10 times, 15 times, even 8 times. And you have to wonder what's going on there. Not maybe you like to take the LSAT, but I think most people don't like to take the LSAT, or they want, I think you don't want to just take the test on a whim, right? And you want to prepare for it. And that's where we start to get a little concerned. But 2 or 3 retakes, that's not going to be a problem at all.
Yeah, definitely. And for those who aren't aware, LSAC does actually have new retake limits they've instituted this year specifically. It used to be that you could take it without limit. And that was, I was thinking, wow, like they're offering more frequent test dates nearly every month now. So people could take it 10 times a year. They quickly shut that down once they realized that they have to reuse some of these old test forms that they were previously unreleased. They don't want people to keep running to the same test and potentially get a boost from that. So the new limits are 3 times in one admission cycle. Cycles run from June 1st to May 31st of the following year. It's a unique LSAC calendar, but 3 times in one cycle, 5 times in 5 years, 7 times for life. You can apply for exceptions. I don't know what circumstances LSAC would consider valid on that front, but there are, in a way, they're trying to save you from yourself and also trying to save themselves from you seeing the undisclosed exams. So be cautious. I don't think most people, they said that less than 1% of people will actually be affected by this change, which I believe, honestly, because you can postpone, you can withdraw. You don't need to rack up takes on your record when you're not ready. So you could take September, October, November and have to wait until June, or you could save some in the bank just in case for the spring.
I think that's good advice. And hopefully that means we will see many less of these, 10 or 15 LSAT time test takers.
Right. Now, how do you look at multiple cancellations or absenteeisms on the record?
It's the same issue. I think, if somebody cancels the test once or is absent once, we don't even need to see an explanation for that. But if we're seeing multiple times of this, and it's not as uncommon as you would think, somebody took the test and they canceled, then they were absent, then they took the test, then they were absent, then they canceled, then they took the test. It does. I think a good general rule of thumb in the application process is don't create a situation where the person reading your file, the admissions officer reading your file, is wondering something. Don't leave any questions unanswered. So if that happened to you, you might want to provide some sort of a brief explanation as to what was going on. But once or twice is no big deal.
Right. In a way, it's like it's over explaining. If it's just once or twice, might you say that it's inordinately calling attention to something that
Absolutely.
maybe doesn't warrant it?
Yeah, and it's quite common for us to see a cancellation or an absentee, and that's fine. We understand things happen. That's not going to be a big issue at all.
Yeah. One question I get a lot from students is, should they write an addendum for a low LSAT score or a low GPA? And my intuition on this is that, the numbers matter. Just get the number rather than making excuses. But what do you typically say about this?
Well, at UCLA, we do have a question on the application which says specifically, if there's anything you want to tell us about your standardized test taking history and or your academic record, you can do that here. So I think it depends, what you're going to say and what was going on. I mean, there's no question that, for example, with the undergraduate transcript, we're looking at 4 years of time, and there may be a semester or a grade, a course in particular, where you didn't do particularly well for any one of a number of reasons. Maybe you were having some health issues that semester or dealing with a personal issue. I think it makes sense to briefly talk about that, either in an addendum or on our application in answer to that question. I think with the LSAT, it's a little bit harder. If somebody really has, though, outperformed in the past their standardized test taking capability, it doesn't hurt to mention that, and it doesn't hurt. Sometimes people share their SAT scores, for example. I see no reason not to do that.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. I suppose that if you can demonstrate you've outperformed your numbers in the past, that would suggest you could going forward.
Exactly.
And law school is primarily academic rather than standardized testing specifically, although, of course, we do have the bar at the end of the road.
We do. That's another beast. Yeah.
I was hoping you could share a little bit, Rob, about just what UCLA Law has to offer in particular, because it's a great school. I hear a lot of great things about it. I know you have some unique programs. We did a discussion a few months back, and I'm hoping you could just share more with everyone about the programs you offer, the specialties, things of that nature. Yeah,
I'd be happy to do that. Although feel free to stop me at any time, because once I get going.
No, please. That's what you're here for.
I can go on for a while. But, and I guess I'll just say to anybody out there that is specifically interested in UCLA, you can feel free to follow up with me by email if you have specific questions about our school or the programs or the process. But we bring in about 300 students every year. I'm assuming most of your listeners have heard about the first year of law school and how you're generally taking the same subjects no matter where you go to law school and experiencing that Socratic method for the first time. But, really the first year of law school, whether it's here or elsewhere, I liken it back in some ways to going back to middle school. You're in one building, you have a locker, you're told who your professors are. And although we do give students a choice in the spring of their first year, they can take an elective, which I think is exciting, and start to develop to be exposed to some of the areas of law that they might have an interest in. But that's the first year. But it's the second and third year at UCLA that I think is incredibly challenging, because what do you take? There are over 200 classes that you can choose from, I would say. There are more than 40 clinical programs that you can choose from. Not sure if all your listeners know what a clinic is, but it's an opportunity to get some hands-on live client experience. And we have 16 partner schools where you can study abroad. There are externships that you can do either in Los Angeles or a full-time externship in another city. So the opportunities are just endless. And I think that's probably the hardest thing about law school. Sure, it's challenging, going to classes, but choosing what to take. You mentioned the bar exam. You're going to want to pass the bar exam. You're going to want to take some classes that prepare you for the bar, but you're also going to have, as I said earlier, 200 classes to choose from. The other thing I've mentioned about UCLA that is unique is we have something called El Centro, which in the first year, it allows students to actually get some clinical experience and to get out into the legal community in Los Angeles and start helping people who need assistance, whether it's recently released prisoners or veterans or tenants that are having landlord issues or low-wage workers. It's interesting, 1Ls are often just sitting in the classroom reading cases from the 19th century, and while some people may find that fascinating, others want to get out and start helping people. That's why they're going to law school. So I love the El Centro Clinic at UCLA. It is student-run, very unique, and 2Ls and 3Ls do it too, but it gives 1Ls the opportunity to get out there. If you want to specialize at UCLA, you can. We could probably have a whole discussion about whether or not you should specialize, but there are 7 different areas where you can, which means you graduate with a notation on your transcript, which says that you fulfilled the requirements in that area. So that could be things like entertainment law, environmental law, business law. There's a critical race studies specialization, a law and philosophy specialization, and a public interest law specialization as well. We also have this new program, which I think is pretty neat, called the Capello Program in Trial Advocacy. You can get a certificate in trial advocacy, and I will brag a little bit and say that last year our team had the best record in the country and went undefeated against other top 25 schools. In fact, one fun fact, the only top 25 school to beat UCLA was UCLA. We actually twice knocked out every other school, so the 2 squads had to face each other. So if you're interested in litigation and trial advocacy, I think this is a really good program for you. So that's a little bit about the program. We have an alumni network of more than 17,000. A lot of people think if you come to UCLA, you're going to have to remain in California. Most of our students want to remain in California, but I was looking at our on-campus interview statistics this year, actually from last year, and actually 45% of the students that got jobs, these are large firm jobs, took them outside of Los Angeles. So I was surprised to see that 45% were leaving LA. A lot of that is probably in the Bay Area, but it's really throughout the country as well. So that's a little bit about the program. Anybody who's going to be in LA is welcome to come by for a visit, sit in on a class, and take a tour. I'm leaving stuff out, believe it or not. I could go on and on, but that's a little bit.
Thanks for sharing, Rob. We actually got a question from the audience here. Steven's asking, any programs for entertainment and/or sports law?
Oh gosh, if I left that off, I did a bad thing. That's one of the 7 specializations. We have the Zifrin Center for Entertainment, Media, Technology, and Sports Law. We could do a whole session on that. Actually, a week from Thursday, that program is sponsoring a really interesting panel. They're bringing back, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 2018 grads. It's called 1 Year Out, and they're talking about what they've been doing in entertainment and sports law for the past year. So anybody interested in that can follow up with me. If you're in LA, by all means, let me know. We'll get you into that. But I'm hoping it'll be recorded, and that might be of interest to people. But I could go on about that. There's so many courses in entertainment law. I was talking about clinics. One of our more interesting clinics is the sports law simulation. We can't really have students engaged in mock contract negotiations for Dodgers or Laker players, but we simulate it. And we have a lot of grads who are working in that field that come in and work with the students and teach them what it would be like to do that, to practice that kind of law. We also have an entertainment law student-edited journal and a very active student organization in entertainment law and sports law, and an annual conference where we bring in really pretty much everybody who's practicing in the field of entertainment law comes to UCLA to kind of to reconnect and to meet and to become educated on some of the latest happenings in the field.
Well, that sounds fantastic. It's great to get that real world experience of what legal practice is actually like. You talked about the theory from the old cases in the 1900s versus or 1800s versus actual practice out there. And so I think for applicants to see what it looks like in practice and what recent grads are doing would be really valuable.
I think it is. I think today, in today's legal job market, I think employers, of course, they're going to have to do some training, but the more practice ready you can be when you get there, the better. You know, we have, for example, I mean, there's so many, but there's a depositions clinic. You know, you learn what a deposition is when you go to law school, but you don't learn how to do a deposition, and this helps you figure that out.
Right, right. We got another question here from Solomon asking about anything non-obvious you can share about character and fitness. If you have any examples you could share of maybe one that was done poorly, one that was done well. Obviously, you could anonymize details, but if there's anything applicants should be on the lookout for if they have some sort of concern.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many specific things that could be that could have happened to somebody, and I think that I'm trying to think how I can best help somebody who might be thinking that. I mean, I've seen, as you can imagine, having done this for more than 20 years, I've seen many, many things. Let me say this: if we admit people who have character and fitness issues. If we didn't admit anybody who was ever found violating, like a minor in possession or who drank alcohol underage, we wouldn't have any lawsuits. So, this happens. I think what's most important is to be upfront and to be complete for the disclosure. I guess an example which comes to mind, which has happened, I guess, frequently enough that it comes to mind, is somebody who perhaps has had multiple infractions of the same nature and doesn't really seem to be taking responsibility for it, and maybe just sort of brushes it off. That's a concern. I think what's important is to be upfront, to be completely candid, to have full disclosure, and to perhaps, if you've learned anything from the experience, to talk about that.
Well, thank you for that. So it sounds
I
like
hope that helps.
No, I think it does. I would imagine that it does. I think you're sharing that you want people to take ownership and take responsibility and give you some reason to believe that it won't happen again.
Exactly. You summed it up very well.
Thanks. No, I'm thinking I get a lot of questions from folks around things like plagiarism or underage drinking or possession of some kind, typically nonviolent things, even things like traffic offenses.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've admitted people who have had all of those offenses. So the problem comes in where somebody doesn't provide full disclosure or just doesn't explain it in such a way that satisfies the admissions committee that this is not a serious problem.
Right.
That's going to resurface in the law school, like plagiarism, for example.
Of course, it's an important one.
Could be a problem, yeah.
Here's one we got from Shannon asking, does UCLA look at an applicant's undergraduate school, their degree, and then weigh the difficulty of the curriculum when looking at their undergraduate GPA?
Yes, and yes. We look at the school. We look at the rigor of it. I'm trying to think, and I think you and I have talked about this, that we should do a session with mock applications, and I really do want to do that because it makes the people, you guys out there that are asking these questions, see just how this is not a formula, and that it's not like we have a list of all the colleges in the country. And we go, oh, you went to that school, so we're going to give you 4 points. And, oh, you went to that school, so we're going to give you 10 points. And, oh, you majored in that, so we're going to give you, this many points because your GPA is within this range. It is a holistic review process. We do get information from the Law School Admissions Council, which tells us from that particular college what was the average GPA over the last few years of people applying to law school. But it doesn't give information about specific majors. So perhaps you were in a major which had less grade inflation. But basically, I say to anybody, that's why there's a question on our application. Is there anything you want to tell us about your academic history? And you could say, well, yeah, I was a chemistry major at this particular school, and the average GPA in my cohort was this, and it even was doing better than that. Or also, I'd like you to focus on some of the non-science classes I took where I did very well. You don't have to say a lot because it's our job to be reading these files, but it's not a time to be modest, and you do want to highlight some of the things that you'd like us to see. There's nothing wrong with doing that. So I hope that answers, the answer is yes, we take it into account, but it's hard to say, there's not a formula. We're just reading these files, trying to make the best decisions that we can, trying to admit people who we think are going to succeed in the class, but there's no formula for that.
No, thanks for sharing that. So it sounds like you are looking at the context, but at the same time, of course, it's not just about the undergraduate institution, not just about the GPA. You're looking at people as individuals and saying, do I think this person would do well here?
Exactly. And when did somebody graduate? When was their record? What was the trend of grades throughout their tenure? And were there any circumstances that impacted them? All of that is valid to be considered by the committee.
Right. Well, here's a good one. I get this one a lot. Lily's asking, do I have to know what area of law I want to practice before I start school?
Absolutely not, in my humble opinion. I think, I was talking earlier about how there's 200 classes, and for most people, this is your last formal educational endeavor. So it's a great opportunity to take a wide range of courses. I guess law school is expensive. You want to have some idea why you're going to law school, but you absolutely don't have to know what area of law. And it's quite common for people to come in who think they know what they want to do and then change their mind by the time they get out. I think one of the more challenging things about law school, just since this is an audience before you even get here, you might want to think about this a little bit, is, you go through your first year, and then even before you start your second year, if you want to work for a private law firm, you are already interviewing with these firms. And before you even start your second year, and you're expected on some level to at least know, geez, am I more litigation focused or more transactional focused? And that's a hard question to answer. But you just want to be giving some thought to that. And to the extent you're getting some work experience, maybe at a law firm before you go to law school, thinking a little bit about which areas you might be interested in. But I don't want everybody to think that means you have to work at a law firm before you go to law school.
Well, I think there's something there, though, the idea of real world exposure, not just to the topic of law that one would practice, but the format, the structure in which they would practice it. Like you said, transactional versus litigation. That could be environmental law, that could be art law, that could be business, sports, anything of the sort.
Right. And to me, that's one of the most exciting things about being a lawyer and the legal profession is there's just so many different areas of law that you can get involved in. We have 60 different student organizations here at the law school, and most of them are a different area of law. So, you literally can look at the bulletin boards and, there's art law and then business law and cannabis law and disability law and education law. I didn't practice before. I'm trying to think of an F, but food law. We have a whole food law program, It would be interesting to go through the alphabet and see what comes to mind. I can't think of a G right now, but, it's just incredible.
Yeah. And I also think maybe folks don't need to know what area of law they want to practice for admissions purposes, but maybe just for themselves also, right? One last thing I would add there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly not important for admissions purposes, but if you do have an idea, it is helpful to tell us in our application. We do ask that question, are there any of our programs that you're interested in? Feel free to talk about that. We're not going to hold you to it. We know you might change your mind once you get here.
Right, of course. Peter's asking about OCI, on-campus interviewing. What kinds of firms come to campus, and do most big law summer associate positions result from the OCI?
Okay, so yes, most big law summer associate and after grad positions, most do come from OCI, on-campus interviewing, which happens early or actually late in the summer before students start their second year of law school. So for the class that's 3Ls right now at UCLA, 71.5% of the students who participated in OCI got their jobs that way. So yes, the vast majority, more than 7 out of 10, got those jobs through that process. And what was his other question? What
kinds of firms come to OCI?
Yeah, so and so you need to realize let's say for the class of 2018, about 65% of our students went to work in private practice. Most of that, or a good chunk of that, is through OCI. And these are the country's largest law firms. I would say most of them have at least 100 or more attorneys working for them. Probably even the vast majority have 500 or more attorneys working for them. And they're in multiple cities throughout the country, and in some cases, even internationally.
Awesome. No, thanks for addressing that. No, it's a big issue. Obviously, people want to know what's going to happen afterwards, but you've got them taken care of, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, right now, things are pretty good. For people that are interested in legal careers, I highly recommend this website, this organization, the National Association for Law Placement, NALP.org. They have a wealth of information and statistics, and I'll do a little plug. The Dean of our career office was just nominated to be there. She's their president-elect. She will take over as president of NALP next year, so we're all very excited about that.
Oh, wow. So UCLA is definitely the place to go to get a job.
You won't like me saying it that way, but she's very knowledgeable.
Okay. We got Ed asking about international applicants. How does admissions evaluate international students, international applicants? Is it the same criteria? What might be different?
Well, in terms of the application process, there's not a lot that's different. You're still going to register through the Law School Admissions Council with the Credential Assembly Service. You're going to send them your transcript. If it's not in English, it'll be translated for us and evaluated. You're still going to sign up and take the law school admissions test. So there's really nothing considerably different as an international applicant.
What about the GPAs on the transcripts, right? LSAC.
Very good point. Yeah. Very good point. Glad you brought that up. So we're not going to see, if you're an international applicant, we're not going to have a grade point average calculated for us by the Law School Admissions Council. It's hard to say what that means. It could mean that we might have to put a little more weight on the LSAT score. If your LSAT score is below our median, you don't have that GPA, even if you did very well, to bring it up. But it's a minority. It's a smaller percentage that apply as international applicants to the JD program. We have a huge international student body in our LLM program. But I'm happy to put anybody in touch with some of our international students, especially if I can find somebody from the country you're from that might help you a little bit figure it out. But I think from your standpoint, you just put your best foot forward, get the best letters of recommendation you can. If there's something, again, that's different about the grading system at your school that you want to share with us, don't assume we know that. Feel free to share that.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Robin. I just want to highlight one thing you said about the LSAT maybe having a little bit more weight in the absence of a GPA. I think that is important to consider. It's a reality. You have the phenomenon of splitters and reverse splitters, and if there's no balance and you just have that one number, that's all you can rely on. I do have a follow-up. Sorry, go ahead, please, Rob.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
I did get a follow-up here from Mehmet asking about non-native English speakers. How might you evaluate international students from other countries? English isn't the first language. What might you be looking at with extra attention, perhaps, in the application? I know the writing sample being digital now, maybe that gets a little more weight now. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I was thinking about that earlier. So with non-native speakers, we do not require the TOEFL. The LSAT is going to be one indication. The writing sample is going to be another strong indication. But I will just mention that I have just recently, for the first time, read these writing samples that are typed out, and what an incredible change it makes on my side. Not that people should feel sorry for me, but if you can imagine reading thousands of these files, having to read people's handwriting, it was so difficult and yet so important to us, and something that we really wanted to read carefully, but it was hard to do, and it really slowed the process down. It is, wow, what a difference to have a typed out answer to these questions. It really makes a difference. So I guess the lesson here is, do take those writing samples seriously. I don't know what you're hearing, Steve, but I hope it's better for the applicants to not have to take that when they're so tired as part of the LSAT. They can take it separately.
Yeah, there's no question it's better to take it when you're fresh. I mean, There might be new anxiety related to doing it, but at least it's going to be a better sample of your work. And I think, honestly, being able to type it means it's like the time constraint's less severe. typing is faster than writing. It's easier to edit, easier to revise, easier to proofread. Yeah. So I think that's kind of nice.
I think in general, we'll see better writing samples as a result of that. And, I don't know to what extent I can help reduce the anxiety, but people should realize it's not graded. And we also realize that you're writing this under time constraints and, that you're under a bit of stress, but we still want to see it and look at it. So.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for that. And we got tons of questions here. I don't know if we'll get to everybody's. I see like 15 unread messages. Wow. We might not get to everything, but whatever we can't get to, please just follow up with us via email and we'll do our best to address it. Let's see. What about time? Is it bad or good to have time in between undergrad and law school in terms of a work experience? How much of a gap becomes too much?
So good or bad, right? I think the way I would answer this is you need to think not about, in my opinion, not about admissions, but about your life. And, if you are somebody who's a senior in college and you want to go to law school, you're excited about going to law school, that's all you've ever wanted to do, you don't have to take a break. Law schools admit people right out of school. Now, some schools are going to vary on that. For us, right now, I'd say we're about a third of our incoming class, although I have to confess, I need to do this. I haven't looked at the class that just started 3 or 4 weeks ago, but last year it was about a third that were right out of undergrad. So if you want to take some time, do that for yourself. Now, work experience can be very helpful in the admissions process, and it can be helpful, especially when you're getting out of law school, looking for that first job. That may be impressive to an employer. But I also think that a lot of these large law firms that we were just talking about are making their hiring decisions based on where you go to law school, your first year grades, and how you interview. So in a quick 20-minute interview, at least initially. So, work experience matters, but it's not all that they're going to look at. And I think you just got to think about, do you want to get going right away? In terms of how much is too much, I've been doing this for over 20 years. We admit people every year who are in their 40s. 50s and older is more rare, but not totally uncommon. So when you're ready to go, you go.
Is there any kind of work experience that you're looking for in particular? Got a follow-up asking about whether the work needs to be legal or not.
I don't think the work needs to be legal. I think if the work is legal, that should be, again, for you, because you've decided that this is going to be beneficial to your career. It's going to help you figure out whether you want to go to law school. You're going to get some great experience, maybe get a great letter of recommendation. All of those things could help you in the application process, but so could, being a nanny for a year, if that's what you want to do. You could talk about your experiences there and how you want to work with children. There's so many different things that you could do that could give you good experience for law school and for your future career. So do what's of most interest to you. And if you can travel around the world for a year, do that.
And I would imagine that there's a wide variety of experiences one could have that could then be framed and discussed in a personal statement.
Oh gosh, it's incredible what people have done. It's one of the most interesting parts of my job to read that. If you look at our website, we just finished this, we posted our entering class profile and we listed all the things that people have done, the corporations that they've worked for, the governmental agencies that they've worked for. It's incredible to take a look and see the breadth of experience.
And I would definitely encourage folks to check it out. Just get a picture of, if this is where you want to go or it's a school you're considering, see what former and current students are like.
Correct.
Let's see. We've got a lot of questions of the work experience stuff, but we've covered that pretty well. What about personal interviews? Are they part of the admission process at UCLA, and how do they factor in?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I was having a long discussion with some of our first-year students last night about this, because they were telling me that they were interviewed at some other law schools that they applied to, but not here at UCLA. We do not interview most of our applicants. We do interview some. We talked earlier about character and fitness issues. If there's something there that we want to go more into depth with you about, we might reach out for an interview. Or if there's just something unexplained, we might reach out. This year, we were able to interview just about everybody that we were seriously considering admitting from our wait list. So we have a little bit more time there. But generally, unfortunately, at least here, we're not going to be able to do interviews. You're welcome to come and meet with us. And I guess anytime you go and meet with a law school admissions office, you should treat it like it's an interview, but it's really not a formal interview. We just don't have the ability right now, or I know some schools have purchased some software to do that. We just have not moved in that direction.
Right. Okay. And how are these interviews? These are conducted over video chat, like Skype?
Yeah. So we do them over Skype. But I did want to add that I think it makes sense to think about your personal statement as if you were coming in for an interview. What would you want us to know about you? What would you want to say? Think about that when you're writing it.
Oh, nice. I'm imagining applicants giving these long and passionate monologues that they could imagine their interviews being like. Yeah, it's a good chance to share something about yourself.
Absolutely.
Tons of other questions here. Here's one. What do you think about reverse splitters?
What do I think about reverse splitters? Gosh, it's only the last couple of years I think that this nomenclature, as far as I know, is out there about splitters, right? And I don't even know what a reverse splitter is. I guess what you mean is you have either your LSAT score above the median and your GPA below, or vice versa. Is that right?
So I think that splitter is high LSAT, low GPA, and then reverse splitter would be high GPA, low LSAT, I think.
First of all, anybody can, I may regret saying this because I may get 1,000 emails, but I mean, you can email me and say, look, I have an LSAT of X, I have a GPA of X, and without giving me any other information, I can look up in a pretty small band how many people applied to UCLA last year and how many people were admitted. Now, how useful is that information is another question, because we're not talking about any of the other things that we look at. But if that number is 90%, you can feel pretty confident that if you apply here, if you're not an axe murderer and you get decent recommendations and you write a decent personal statement, you're probably going to be offered admission. And if it's 10% or less, you might write an incredible personal statement and have amazing work experience and have glowing letters, but it's going to be hard to get in here. And if that number is 50%, wow, that's where all that other stuff is really going to matter a lot. So that'll give you some sense. But to answer the question the way you phrased it, what do I think? Well, most of our students that are here are splitters. So, probably, I don't know the exact percentages, but close to half are reverse splitters and close to half are not. So, there are some people here, a small percentage, that have both numbers above our medians. There are some people here that are a small percentage that have both numbers below our medians, no question. But if you look at the vast majority, that's where they are. They're splitters.
And I would imagine that also things vary from year to year, right? So even if you did look at the admitted class last year, that would not necessarily fully translate to this year, as the medians do shift and then the needs on your end shift as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that, depending on the national pool, medians can shift, GPAs can shift, but one thing that has remained constant is the majority of our students are splitters. So that, you can be rest assured, is going to keep being the case, at least for the short time being here.
I would imagine that you believe that both numbers, LSAT and GPA, are relevant and important and useful in some way in making your decisions.
They are, but I think that's why it's helpful hopefully to have humans reading these files, because they mean different things to different people. And the LSAT, talk about somebody, for example, we were talking before about somebody who's been out of school. You've been out of school for 10 years. You didn't take your undergraduate studies seriously. You have a very low GPA, but you've gone off on this incredible trajectory, have this very interesting career, and do very well on the LSAT. It's quite likely that the grades just aren't going to be predictive in your case. We might take that chance on somebody. And likewise, like we talked about earlier, there could be somebody who their SATs just weren't predictive. We might take a chance on that person. So that's why we're reading these files.
Right. Thanks, Rob. I want to circle back to something you said a little bit earlier about treating the personal statement like an interview. showing another side of yourself. I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that just a little bit more, because I did think it was an interesting idea just in terms of inspiring folks.
Yeah, I'll try. I think that at least for us, somewhere in that personal statement should be something about why you want to go to law school. So, I have read a very interesting personal statements. I've read them, but then I get to the end and I think, well, what was the point of this? Why did I just read that? Something in there has to be, for us anyway, something about why they want to go to law school. But, I think you can really make yourself crazy spending too much time thinking about what you should write your personal statement about. I get so many people that come up to me and say, can I ask your opinion? I'm thinking about writing about this, or I'm thinking about writing about that. And what do you think? As if, most of the time when they say that, not all the time, but most of the time, I think, I mean, they both sound pretty good. They both could be interesting. They both sound legitimate and valid topics for a personal statement. So I say, maybe the best advice I could give somebody is try to have somebody read it who but you don't know all that well, and say, look, if you were looking to admit me or hire me, did you get to know me well? Did you find this interesting? Did you like reading it? And then you've done your job. There's no secret to this stuff. It's, you have to apply to a range of schools and put yourself into a range of schools where those numbers that I was talking about earlier, apply to some schools where it's 5 or 10%, but apply to some schools where it's 90%, and then write the best personal statement that you can, and you should be in good shape.
Thanks for that, Rabbi. I love the idea that, any topic could make for a great personal statement. It's all about what you do with it, right? How you execute it.
Absolutely. And how you come off. We talked earlier about it. Should you apply right out of undergrad or not? I read personal statements from people that are applying right out of school that sound incredibly mature, like they know what they're getting into. And there's others that I read that I just think they don't come off as mature, or like they really have a handle on why they're going to law school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's something you said, no unanswered questions from admissions. That's certainly a big one. Does this person know why they want to go? Do they have a good reason?
Absolutely. I mean, look, we're fortunate to have a lot of people that are applying that would like to be here, and we're trying to make the best decisions we can. We want to take people who are really going to take advantage of this education.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Rob, this has been a blast. I know we've covered a lot of questions. There are still some that are unanswered, but I think we hit the big ones for now. Okay. And I'd love to do a follow-up with you sometime about doing those case studies we've talked about.
I would. We're working on that. So we will do that. And I think that would be a lot of fun to figure out a way to do that and get that out, to maybe put it up and have people take a few minutes to read it, and then talk about, have people perhaps vote on what they would do. But I think the lesson that people will come away with, I can guarantee, is that there's no consensus all the time. And that's why these are people making decisions. And that's why somebody may get into one law school and not another law school, that with very similar, credentials that have the same medians and things like that.
Well, I would imagine that would certainly be useful, just to have to allow people to have a little more empathy for what's happening on your side of the desk with that.
Yeah. By the way, I don't know if you saw I see one question where somebody asked if there's going to be a recording of this. I don't know if you want to,
I was definitely planning to release the recording. Okay. Yeah.
Good. And if people have questions for me, they're welcome to follow up and just email me at my email is schwartz_r, SCHWARTZR @law.ucla.edu. But please forgive me if I take a little while to get back, because this is the time of year where we're doing some recruiting, so I may be traveling. Oh, and I should mention that I guess you have listeners all over the place, but on our website we have a list of all the events where we're going to be at. So if we're going to be in your neck of the woods, I feel like I'm doing a commercial or something, but if we're going to be in your area, come by and say hi.
Well, Rob, I really appreciate it. I've shared your email in the chat just for folks to bombard you. Hopefully not too much, but Rob, I appreciate your openness. You're definitely unique in the admission space. You're being so open and honest and willing to share your advice and insights with everyone applying, which I know definitely reduces the stress levels a little bit and helps people get a little more clarity on what they're looking to do.
I hope so.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem. It's always great talking with you, Steve.
Yeah, same, Rob. Well, again, thanks everyone for joining tonight. And yes, the recording will be available. And you can always email me if you want to get access to it. Carl is actually asking Rob, where can folks see where you're going to be? Is there a list of where you're touring?
Yeah, if you go to the UCLA website, you just go to admissions and then scroll down and it says recruitment events. And we have them listed by date and also by geographic area.
Oh, very cool. So you're selling T-shirts to the 2019 tour?
Maybe I should bring them with me, UCLA T-shirts, and like raffle them off or something.
I'm sure folks would love that. All right, Rob. Well, again, thanks again for joining tonight. Thank you to everyone for attending.
You're welcome. Hope everybody has a good night.
Yes, and please be in touch, everyone. Any questions at all? Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.